Long ago, beyond the mountains where ancient forests stretched endlessly beneath the sky, countless birds lived together among towering trees, crystal rivers, and hidden valleys. Their songs filled the morning air, and their wings painted the heavens with countless colors. For many generations, the birds had honored one supreme ruler above all others, Garuda, the golden-winged king. Garuda was a magnificent being. His wings were said to shine like the sun, and his strength was beyond that of ordinary creatures. Among the birds, his name carried great respect. They believed that having such a powerful king meant their entire race was protected. However, as years passed, the birds slowly discovered a painful truth. A king who possesses great power but never uses it to protect his people is no different from a forgotten shadow. Garuda spent most of his time serving the heavenly beings. His attention was always directed toward distant realms, divine duties, and matters beyond the forest. The birds admired his greatness, but when danger arrived, his greatness brought them no comfort. When hunters entered the forest and secretly placed nets among the trees, the birds cried for help. When sharp-eyed hawks and fierce eagles descended from the sky, chasing the smaller birds through the branches, they searched the heavens for their king. But Garuda never appeared. The birds waited. They hoped. They prayed that one day their ruler would hear their suffering and come to their rescue. Yet season after season passed, and nothing changed. The young birds grew up hearing stories of their mighty king, but they never witnessed his protection. The old birds began to whisper among themselves, "What is the value of a king who cannot hear the cries of his own people? A ruler who carries a glorious name but abandons those who depend on him is only a symbol without meaning. A kingdom without protection is no different from a forest ruled by fear." These words slowly spread among all the birds. One evening, beneath an ancient banyan tree, the birds gathered together. Thousands of wings covered the branches, and every species came to share its thoughts. The parrots, swans, pigeons, peacocks, and countless other birds looked at each other with worried eyes. They were not gathering to celebrate. They were gathering because they had lost hope. An elder bird slowly opened the meeting. "For too long, we have waited for protection that never arrived. A true ruler is not measured by appearance, strength, or reputation. A true ruler is measured by compassion, responsibility, and the willingness to stand beside those who suffer." The forest became silent. Every bird understood the truth. A crown without responsibility was only decoration. A throne without compassion was only an empty seat. The birds finally made a decision. They would choose a new king. This time, they would not choose the most powerful creature. They would not choose the most beautiful creature. They would not choose the creature with the greatest reputation. They would choose someone who could truly protect them. The birds began observing one another carefully. Each species considered its own strengths. The swan was graceful and elegant, but many worried that kindness alone could not defeat danger. The peacock possessed extraordinary beauty, but beauty could not stop hunters or predators. The pigeons were peaceful and gentle, but they lacked the power to command the entire flock. The birds continued searching. Then, among the gathered creatures, someone noticed a silent figure resting on a dark branch. It was the owl. The owl sat motionless, watching everything with enormous eyes. Unlike many birds, the owl possessed incredible vision during the night. Even when darkness covered the forest, the owl could clearly see what others could not. Its calm expression and mysterious appearance impressed the birds. They began whispering, "The owl can see through darkness. The owl is powerful. The owl is different from everyone else. Perhaps this is the ruler we have been searching for." As more birds looked toward the owl, their doubts slowly disappeared. They saw only its strengths. They saw the ability to navigate darkness. They saw the powerful eyes. They saw the dignity of its posture. They did not yet see the weaknesses hidden behind those qualities. They did not yet understand that a talent useful in one situation does not always make someone suitable to lead an entire kingdom. The forest birds became excited. They began preparing for a grand ceremony. Sacred water would be brought from holy rivers. Flowers and herbs would decorate the place of coronation. A magnificent throne would be prepared. Prayers would be spoken. The owl would soon become the king of all birds. But deep within the darkness of the forest, another creature watched silently. A creature with sharp intelligence. A creature who understood that choosing a ruler based only on appearance could bring disaster. The crow. The crow had not yet spoken. But soon, its voice would challenge the entire gathering. Soon, the birds would face a choice between desire and wisdom. And the decision they made would change the fate of two great clans forever. The forest had never been so busy. After the birds decided to choose the owl as their new king, excitement spread throughout every branch and every nest. The disappointment they once carried toward their former ruler, Garuda, was temporarily replaced by hope. At last, they believed they had found a protector. At last, they believed someone would stand between them and danger. The birds began preparing the coronation ceremony with great enthusiasm. They wanted this moment to become a symbol of a new beginning. From the deepest valleys, they gathered flowers of different colors. From clear mountain streams, they collected pure water. From ancient forests, they searched for sacred herbs believed to bring blessings and protection. Every bird contributed what it could. Some carried flowers in their beaks. Some collected fragrant leaves. Some decorated the ceremonial ground with colorful feathers. The entire forest seemed to awaken for the arrival of its new ruler. In the center of the gathering place, the birds prepared a magnificent throne. They placed it beneath a large ancient tree, where sunlight could pass through the leaves during the day and where the stars could shine above at night. The throne was covered with soft materials and decorated with symbols of authority. Finally, they brought a tiger skin and placed it upon the seat. Among the creatures of the forest, the tiger represented strength, courage, and dominance. The birds believed that placing the owl upon this throne would transform it into a powerful guardian of their entire kingdom. They imagined a future where no hunter could approach without fear. They imagined a future where no eagle or hawk would dare attack their nests. They imagined a future where every bird could fly freely without constantly looking behind. Hope filled their hearts. However, they did not realize that hope can sometimes blind those who desire change too quickly. The birds looked only at what the owl possessed. They did not ask what kind of heart lived behind those powerful eyes. They did not ask whether the owl truly understood compassion. They did not ask whether the owl could carry the burden of leadership. They saw a solution and rushed toward it. The ceremony preparations continued. A group of respected Brahmins was invited to perform sacred prayers. They prepared verses, rituals, and blessings for the new king. The birds believed that through the sacred ceremony, the owl would receive the authority to rule over all flying creatures. The day of the coronation finally arrived. Birds from every corner of the forest gathered around. The colorful feathers of countless species created a sea of movement and light. Parrots sat among green branches. Peacocks spread their magnificent tails. Pigeons gathered peacefully together. Swans watched silently from nearby waters. Everyone waited for the moment when the owl would officially become their king. And then, the owl appeared. Slowly, it walked toward the throne. Its large eyes reflected the surrounding flames and golden decorations. Its feathers were dark and mysterious. Its expression appeared calm and powerful. The birds looked at it with admiration. "This is our new ruler," they whispered. "This is the one who will protect us. This is the king who will bring peace." But inside the owl's heart, another feeling was growing. Pride. For a long time, the owl had lived quietly in the darkness. Many creatures feared it. Many birds avoided it. But now, for the first time, an entire kingdom was preparing to bow before it. The feeling was intoxicating. The owl lifted its head higher. It began imagining the power that would soon belong to it. It imagined thousands of birds obeying its commands. It imagined every creature in the forest respecting its authority. It imagined the entire sky becoming its kingdom. The owl was no longer thinking about protecting others. It was thinking about being worshipped. As the ceremony approached, the owl's hidden ambition slowly revealed itself. It climbed onto a high stone and looked down upon the birds gathering below. Its posture changed. It no longer appeared like a humble creature receiving responsibility. It appeared like someone claiming ownership. The owl spoke proudly, "Soon, all birds will recognize my authority. Those who obey will receive my protection. But those who challenge my commands will face punishment." The birds did not notice the change. They were too excited. They only heard the words of a future king. They did not hear the voice of arrogance. They did not understand that a ruler who seeks obedience before responsibility may eventually become a threat to those he rules. The preparations continued. The sacred water was placed nearby. The flowers were arranged. The throne waited. The prayers were ready. Everything seemed perfect. The birds believed history was about to change. But far away, one bird watched everything carefully. The crow. Unlike the others, the crow was not impressed by appearances. It observed the owl's behavior. It noticed the pride in its voice. It noticed the desire for control hidden behind its promises. The crow understood something the others had forgotten: a king is not chosen because he looks powerful. A king is chosen because he protects the powerless. The crow knew that the birds were making a dangerous mistake. But speaking against the decision of the entire flock was not easy. The birds were already filled with excitement. They were already preparing the ceremony. They wanted a new king. They wanted change. And when a crowd becomes attached to an idea, even wisdom can sound like opposition. The crow remained silent for a moment. It looked at the gathering birds. It looked at the owl sitting proudly above them. It understood that if nobody spoke, disaster would follow. Finally, the crow opened its wings. It prepared to fly toward the ceremony. Soon, it would speak words that many birds did not want to hear. Soon, it would challenge the dream of a new king. And soon, the entire forest would discover whether it valued truth more than excitement. The forest was filled with anticipation. The coronation ceremony of the owl was about to begin. Every bird had gathered around the sacred ground, waiting for the final moment when the owl would receive the blessing and officially become the ruler of all birds. The atmosphere was filled with excitement. The birds believed they were witnessing the birth of a new era. They imagined a future where fear would disappear. They imagined a future where their nests would remain safe. They imagined a future where no predator would dare threaten them. The ceremony area had been carefully prepared. Sacred water from holy rivers was placed inside golden vessels. Fresh flowers surrounded the throne. Fragrant herbs were arranged around the ceremonial platform. The Brahmins stood ready to recite ancient prayers. Everything seemed perfect. The owl sat proudly upon the tiger-skin throne. It kept its body still, trying to appear calm and majestic. But inside its heart, pride continued to grow. It looked at the birds gathered below. Thousands of creatures were waiting for its command. For the first time in its life, the owl felt that it was above everyone else. It no longer felt like an ordinary creature of the forest. It felt like a ruler destined to control the skies. The owl imagined endless obedience. It imagined every bird lowering its head before it. It imagined its name being spoken with fear and respect. The desire for power became stronger with every passing moment. However, while the birds were celebrating, one creature remained deeply concerned. The crow. The crow had watched everything carefully. Unlike the other birds, it did not only look at appearances. It looked at the nature hidden beneath appearances. It saw the owl's ambition. It heard the arrogance in its words. It understood that the birds had mistaken ability for wisdom. The crow knew that seeing clearly in darkness did not mean one could guide others through the light. A ruler needed more than sharp eyes. A ruler needed a compassionate heart. A ruler needed patience, fairness, and responsibility. The crow looked around at the excited birds. It saw that everyone had already accepted the owl. Many would not want to hear criticism. Many would consider any warning to be an insult toward their chosen king. But the crow also understood another truth: when danger approaches, silence becomes a form of betrayal. Even if nobody wants to listen, someone must speak. The crow finally spread its wings. It flew across the forest toward the ceremony. The sound of its wings attracted the attention of the gathered birds. Many turned their heads. Some frowned. Others whispered among themselves. Why is the crow coming now? Why does it interrupt such an important moment? Today is a day of celebration. Why bring doubts into our happiness? The crow landed near the ceremonial ground. It looked at the owl sitting on the throne. Then it looked at all the birds gathered around. Its voice was calm but serious. Friends, before this ceremony continues, I ask you to listen to my words. The birds became silent. The crow continued, I do not speak because I dislike the owl. I do not speak because I wish to prevent change. I speak because choosing a ruler is the most important decision a kingdom can make. Once a crown is placed upon someone's head, removing it is not easy. The birds listened quietly. The crow turned toward the owl. Everyone sees that the owl has powerful eyes. Everyone sees that it can see clearly during the night. But have you asked yourselves, Is a creature suitable to rule all birds simply because it can see in darkness? The birds looked at each other. Some began to hesitate. The crow continued, "Our lives are not lived only at night. Most birds search for food during the day. Most birds build nests under the sunlight. Most dangers that threaten us appear when the sky is bright." The crow pointed toward the forest. When hunters enter the woods during the day, when hawks and eagles attack from above, when our young birds cry for help, where will our king be? The gathering became quiet. The crow spoke again, "The owl's vision is a gift. But every gift has its limits. A talent that helps someone in one situation does not automatically make that person capable of protecting everyone." The birds began to think. For the first time, some questioned whether they had chosen too quickly. The crow continued, "During the day, the owl cannot see clearly. It cannot recognize dangers approaching before its eyes. How can a king protect a kingdom if the greatest threats arrive when he cannot even see?" Some birds lowered their heads. They had never considered this problem. They had been fascinated by the owl's uniqueness. They had forgotten to ask whether that uniqueness matched the needs of the entire flock. The crow then spoke about another concern. The darkness is not the only problem. The nature of a ruler matters more than the abilities of a ruler. A kingdom does not need a creature that only appears powerful. It needs a creature that can control its own anger, a creature that can listen, a creature that can forgive. The crow looked directly at the owl. Before giving someone the power to punish others, we must first know whether that person understands mercy. The owl's expression changed slightly. The words of the crow touched the hidden truth inside its heart. The owl had indeed been thinking about punishment. It had already imagined forcing others to obey. But it did not want the birds to see that side of itself. The owl remained silent. The birds became uncertain. The ceremony that once seemed unstoppable had suddenly slowed. The sacred water remained untouched. The flowers remained waiting. The prayers were not yet spoken. A single voice had created doubt among thousands. But wisdom does not always win immediately. Sometimes, truth arrives at the wrong moment. And sometimes, people reject a warning not because it is false, but because accepting it would mean admitting they were wrong. The birds looked at each other. Their excitement began to weaken. Their dream of a perfect new king began to shake. And the crow stood quietly, waiting for their answer. For a moment, the entire forest became silent. The crow's words floated through the air like a cold wind passing between ancient trees. Thousands of birds stood motionless. The excitement that had filled their hearts only moments before had disappeared. They looked at the owl sitting upon the tiger-skin throne. Then they looked at each other. Some birds began to question their decision. Perhaps the crow was right. Perhaps they had chosen too quickly. Perhaps they had only seen the owl's strengths while ignoring its weaknesses. But doubt was not the only emotion spreading among the birds. There was another feeling growing stronger. Resistance. The birds had already dreamed of a new king. They had already prepared the ceremony. They had already imagined a future protected by the owl. To accept the crow's words meant admitting that their hopes might have been mistaken. And many creatures find it difficult to accept that the dream they are holding onto may be an illusion. A group of birds began whispering. Why does the crow always bring problems? Why must it question everything? The owl has not even become king yet. How can we judge it so quickly? Perhaps the crow is simply jealous. These voices became louder. The birds slowly forgot the wisdom behind the warning. Instead, they focused on the discomfort caused by hearing it. One of the older birds stepped forward. It looked at the crow with disappointment. "Crow, your words may sound intelligent, but today is not the time for criticism. We have gathered here after suffering for many years. We finally found someone who can protect us. Why do you want to destroy our hope before the ceremony even begins?" The crow remained calm. It replied, "I do not wish to destroy hope. I wish to protect you from false hope. A wrong choice made today may bring suffering for many generations." But the birds were no longer listening with open hearts. They only heard a creature standing against their decision. Another bird spoke, "The owl has great vision. The owl has strength. The owl has a powerful appearance. Why should we reject such a capable ruler because of possibilities that have not happened yet?" The crow looked at them sadly. It understood something important. Many beings judge a person by what they can do. Few judge them by what they might become. A sharp sword can protect a kingdom. But it can also destroy it in the wrong hands. A powerful ruler can defend a people. But the same power can become a weapon against those who obey. The crow wanted the birds to understand this. But their hearts were already attached to their choice. The owl watched everything from the throne. At first, it felt anger toward the crow. How dare this creature challenge its future authority? How dare it speak against the coronation? But as the discussion continued, another emotion appeared. The owl felt satisfied. The birds were defending it. They were choosing it. They were rejecting the one who questioned it. The owl slowly realized, even before becoming king, it already possessed influence. This strengthened its pride. It remained silent, allowing the birds to fight for its position. The crow looked toward the owl. It noticed something disturbing. A true leader would have spoken. A true leader would have shown humility. A true leader would have said, "Let us carefully consider these concerns." But the owl said nothing. It simply watched while others defended its throne. The crow understood. Silence can reveal a person's nature. The birds continued arguing. Some supported the crow. Others supported the owl. The peaceful gathering began turning into conflict. Finally, a group of birds shouted, "Enough! We did not gather here to create disagreement. We gathered to choose a king. The ceremony must continue." The birds who supported the owl became impatient. They believed the crow had already ruined the happiness of the day. They wanted the doubts to disappear. They wanted the celebration to return. One bird flew closer to the crow and said, "You always look for danger. You always expect the worst. Perhaps your fear prevents you from seeing opportunities." The crow answered gently, "Fear is not the reason I speak. Wisdom is." A bird that notices a storm approaching is not creating the storm. It is warning others to seek shelter. But the birds had already made their emotional decision. They did not want a warning. They wanted confirmation. They wanted someone to tell them they had chosen correctly. And because the crow could not give them that comfort, they rejected its words. The crowd became restless. The ceremony ground that was once peaceful became filled with disagreement. Finally, many birds turned toward the crow. Their voices became harsh. "Leave. Do not ruin this sacred ceremony. You have spoken enough. Let us welcome our new king." The crow looked around. The faces that had once gathered together as one family were now filled with anger and impatience. It felt a deep sadness. Not because the birds rejected it, but because they rejected the truth that might have protected them. The crow lowered its head. It knew that wisdom cannot be forced upon those who refuse to receive it. A teacher can offer knowledge, but cannot force another being to understand. The crow spread its wings. Before leaving, it spoke one final sentence: "I hope that one day you will remember these words. A ruler is not proven by the power of the crown. A ruler is proven by the kindness in the heart." Then the crow flew away from the ceremony. It traveled to a distant tree at the edge of the forest. Behind it, the birds returned to their preparations. They believed the problem had disappeared. They believed the crow had only brought unnecessary fear. They believed their new king would bring peace. But deep inside the forest, the consequences of their choice had already begun. And sitting upon the throne, surrounded by admiration, the owl smiled quietly. the crow disappeared into the distance. Its dark wings moved silently across the sky until it reached a lonely tree far away from the ceremony. From there, it looked back toward the gathering place. The sounds of celebration still echoed through the forest. The birds were singing. The drums of the ceremony were beating. The prayers of the Brahmins continued. Everything appeared peaceful. But the crow knew that beneath this happiness was a hidden danger. It did not feel anger toward the birds. It did not blame them for rejecting its warning. Instead, it felt sadness. The crow understood that many creatures do not reject truth because truth is wrong. They reject truth because truth arrives when they are not ready to accept it. The birds had suffered for a long time under fear. They desperately wanted a protector. They wanted someone powerful. They wanted a symbol that could erase their anxiety. And because the owl looked powerful, they believed it must also be wise. But the crow knew, power and wisdom are not the same. A sharp blade may be valuable. But without a careful hand, it can cause harm. A strong ruler may defend a kingdom, but without compassion, that same ruler can become the greatest danger. Meanwhile, at the ceremony ground, the birds continued preparing. The departure of the crow was quickly forgotten. The birds told themselves, the crow only created unnecessary doubt. The ceremony must continue. Our new king will prove everyone wrong. They returned their attention to the owl. The owl remained sitting upon the tiger-skin throne. It looked calm. It looked majestic. It looked exactly like the ruler the birds wanted to see. But inside, the owl's heart was filled with pride. The crow's words had angered it. However, the anger was mixed with a stronger feeling. A desire to prove its superiority. The owl thought, soon, every bird will bow before me. Soon, they will understand that I was born to rule. Soon, no one will dare question my authority again. The owl no longer thought about service. It thought about control. The ceremony finally began. The Brahmins stepped forward. They carried the sacred water and began reciting ancient verses. The birds became silent. They watched carefully as the ritual unfolded. The prayers rose into the sky. The flowers surrounded the throne. The fragrance of herbs filled the air. The birds believed that a sacred transformation was taking place. They believed an ordinary creature was becoming a great king. The Brahmins approached the owl. They prepared to perform the coronation blessing. The sacred water was lifted. The birds waited for the final moment. They imagined that after this moment, their future would change forever. But the owl's mind was far away. It was not thinking about protecting the weak. It was not thinking about carrying responsibility. It was thinking about authority. It imagined issuing commands. It imagined others fearing its anger. It imagined the entire forest following its will. The ritual continued. The owl received the blessing. The birds celebrated. They cried out, "Long live the king! May the owl protect all birds. May peace return to the forest." Their voices echoed between the trees. The owl listened. And the more it heard their praise, the stronger its pride became. For the first time, it experienced the taste of power. It realized something dangerous. People's admiration can become more addictive than any treasure. A creature who receives constant praise may begin believing that praise is proof of greatness. The owl slowly forgot why it had been chosen. It forgot that the birds wanted protection. It only remembered that they wanted to obey. After the ceremony, the birds prepared to approach the new king. They expected the owl to speak words of kindness. They expected promises of safety. They expected their ruler to comfort them. But the owl remained silent. It looked around at the birds. Then it finally spoke, "From today onward, all birds must respect my commands." The birds listened. The owl continued, "A kingdom cannot exist without discipline. Those who follow my orders will receive my favor. Those who challenge my authority will face consequences." Some birds felt uncomfortable. The words were not what they expected. They had hoped for a protector. But they heard the voice of someone demanding obedience. However, because they had already chosen the owl, many ignored their uneasiness. They told themselves, "A powerful king must naturally speak with authority. This is simply the strength of leadership." They tried to convince themselves that everything was normal. The owl looked satisfied. It believed the birds had accepted its rule. But the truth was different. The birds respected the position. Not necessarily the creature sitting upon it. The ceremony continued until the sun began moving across the sky. The birds gradually became tired. One by one, they began leaving. Some returned to their nests. Some went searching for food. Some flew back to their families. But nobody noticed something important. The owl was still sitting on the throne. The owl was waiting. It expected every bird to remain nearby. It expected endless attention. It expected constant admiration. It believed that becoming king meant the world would revolve around it. But a throne cannot force love. A crown cannot create loyalty. A ruler who seeks worship before responsibility eventually discovers loneliness. As the afternoon passed, fewer and fewer birds remained. The ceremony area slowly became empty. The flowers remained. The sacred water remained. The tiger skin throne remained. But the crowd disappeared. The owl did not notice. Because during the day, the owl's vision was weak. The bright sunlight made it difficult for the owl to see clearly. It sat proudly in the center of the empty ceremony ground. Waiting. Believing. Dreaming. It imagined thousands of birds still surrounding it. It imagined a kingdom already under its control. It imagined a future filled with power. But reality was completely different. The birds had already left. The throne was empty. The forest was silent. And the new king sat alone, unaware that his kingdom had vanished before it even began. The sun slowly moved across the sky. Golden light passed through the branches of the ancient trees and covered the forest floor. The ceremony ground, which had once been filled with thousands of voices, had become strangely quiet. The flowers remained scattered around the throne. The sacred water still rested inside its golden container. The incense continued releasing a faint fragrance into the air. Everything was still there. Everything except the birds. But the owl did not know. It remained seated upon the tiger-skin throne, waiting for its subjects to return. In its mind, the ceremony was still continuing. It imagined countless birds standing before it. It imagined their eyes filled with admiration. It imagined their voices calling its name. The owl believed that becoming king had transformed its existence forever. It believed that from this moment onward, every creature would revolve around its authority. The owl lifted its head proudly. Soon, it thought, they will come back. Soon, they will understand the greatness of their king. The hours passed. The forest slowly changed from afternoon into evening. The bright sunlight weakened. The shadows of the trees stretched longer across the ground. Still, no bird returned. The owl became slightly impatient. It moved its wings. It looked around. But because the daylight was still too strong, everything around it remained unclear. The owl could not see the empty branches. It could not see the abandoned ceremony ground. It could not see that the kingdom it dreamed of ruling existed only inside its imagination. The owl finally spoke. "Where are my attendants? Why has nobody come forward? Have they forgotten their king?" Its voice echoed through the silent forest, but no one answered. The owl waited. Then it called again. "Come here. I have commands to give. I have matters that require attention." Still, only the wind replied. The owl became confused. It had expected obedience. It had expected birds rushing toward it. It had expected everyone to compete for its favor. But instead, it faced silence. The same birds who had celebrated its coronation were gone. The same birds who had praised it were no longer nearby. The owl did not understand. It believed that becoming king meant receiving endless devotion. It did not understand that devotion cannot be demanded. Respect cannot be forced. And loyalty cannot be created through a crown alone. Meanwhile, far away from the ceremony, the birds had gathered again. Not to celebrate. Not to continue the coronation. But to discuss what had happened. The crow's warning had remained in their minds. Although many had rejected it at first, the words continued echoing. Some birds admitted, perhaps the crow had a point. Perhaps we only saw the owl's abilities. Perhaps we did not think carefully enough. The birds looked toward the forest where the owl remained. They felt uncomfortable. They had wanted a protector. But the first words from their new king were commands and punishments. They had wanted compassion. But they heard authority. A few birds began discussing whether they should return and continue the ceremony. Others suggested waiting until they understood the situation better. Finally, they reached a decision: they would leave the owl alone for now. They would gather again another day and choose a ruler more carefully. The birds believed this would prevent conflict. They believed the matter could end peacefully. But they did not realize something important. The owl was not thinking peacefully. While the birds were reconsidering their choice, the owl was experiencing something completely different. Humiliation. Confusion. And finally, anger. As darkness slowly approached, the owl's vision began returning. The world around it gradually became clearer. The shapes of the trees appeared. The empty ground became visible. The abandoned flowers became visible. The silent throne became visible. And then, the truth finally reached the owl. There was nobody there. No birds. No attendants. No followers. No kingdom. Only emptiness. The owl stared around in disbelief. For a moment, it could not understand what had happened. Only hours earlier, thousands of birds had gathered around it. They had prepared a throne. They had performed sacred rituals. They had called it their king. But now, everyone was gone. The owl slowly stood up. Its heart began burning with shame. It felt as though the entire forest had laughed at it. It felt betrayed. It felt abandoned. But the owl did not look inward. It did not ask, why did they leave? What mistake did I make? Did I truly deserve their trust? Instead, its pride searched for someone to blame. And pride always finds an enemy. The owl remembered the crow. The only bird who had opposed it. The only bird who had questioned the ceremony. the only bird who had warned others before the coronation. The owl's eyes became filled with hatred. It was the crow. The crow destroyed everything. The crow poisoned their minds against me. The crow stole my throne. The owl convinced itself that the failure was not caused by its own arrogance. It was caused by another creature. This was the beginning of a dangerous transformation. A wise being learns from rejection. A proud being turns rejection into hatred. The owl spread its wings. The peaceful forest night had arrived. Under the darkness, its powerful vision returned completely. The creature that had once been chosen because it could see through the night now saw something else clearly. Its own anger. The owl looked toward the distant trees where crows lived. A terrible thought formed in its mind. If the crow had never spoken, I would already be king. If the crow had not warned them, I would have their respect forever. The owl's heart became filled with resentment. It made a vow beneath the moonlight: the crow will pay for this. From this day forward, crows will be my enemies. The forest did not know it yet. But a small disagreement during a coronation ceremony had created the beginning of a great conflict. Two bird clans that once lived under the same sky would soon become enemies. And the hatred born from one wounded pride would continue for generations. The night covered the ancient forest. The moon slowly rose above the trees, spreading a cold silver light across the silent land. Most creatures had already fallen asleep. The gentle sounds of the forest had disappeared. Only the whisper of the wind and the distant cries of night creatures remained. But one creature was still awake. The owl. It stood on a high branch, looking toward the distant darkness where the crows lived. Its eyes, which were powerful only under the night sky, shone with anger. The owl had once believed that the crown would bring respect. It had believed that the throne would bring admiration. It had believed that becoming king would make every bird recognize its greatness. But instead, it experienced the greatest humiliation of its life. The throne was empty. The ceremony was abandoned. The birds had left. And the owl could not accept this reality. A wounded heart can sometimes seek understanding. But a wounded ego often seeks revenge. The owl chose revenge. It repeated the same thought again and again: the crow ruined everything. The crow made the birds doubt me. The crow stole what belonged to me. The owl refused to look at its own actions. It refused to remember the arrogance in its voice. It refused to remember that it had spoken of punishment before offering compassion. It refused to admit that the birds had left because they saw the danger hidden within its ambition. Instead, it created a different story. A story where it was the victim. A story where another creature was responsible for its failure. This is how hatred begins. Not always from true injustice. Sometimes from pride that cannot accept rejection. The owl remained on the branch throughout the night. It imagined different possibilities. If the crow had remained silent, I would have become king. If the crow had not warned them, the entire forest would have obeyed me. Every thought made the hatred stronger. By the time the moon reached the highest point in the sky, the owl had made its decision. The crow would become its enemy forever. From that night onward, the owl remembered the crow's voice not as a warning, but as an insult. It remembered wisdom not as protection, but as betrayal. The owl believed that the crow had taken away its destiny, and when someone believes another creature has stolen their destiny, forgiveness becomes extremely difficult. Meanwhile, far away, the crows continued living peacefully. They did not know that a new enemy had been created. They did not know that one conversation had planted the seed of a war. They did not know that their future would soon be filled with fear and conflict. The crow who had warned the birds returned to its own group. The other crows noticed its serious expression. "What happened?" they asked. "Why do you look troubled?" The crow replied, "I tried to prevent a mistake. But the birds did not want to listen." The other crows asked, "Did they choose a new king?" The crow looked toward the dark forest. Yes. They chose the owl. A silence fell among the crows. Many understood the danger immediately. They knew the nature of the owl. They knew that a creature who desired power without compassion could become dangerous. One elder crow spoke, "A ruler's first test is not how others treat them. It is how they respond when challenged. If someone cannot accept advice, they cannot accept responsibility." The crow remained silent. It remembered the owl sitting proudly on the throne. It remembered the satisfaction in the owl's eyes when others defended it. It remembered the silence of the owl when wisdom challenged its decision. The crow knew something had changed. The owl was not simply disappointed. It was wounded by pride. And pride that is wounded often becomes hatred. Days passed. Then weeks. The forest slowly returned to normal. The birds continued their lives. The rivers continued flowing. The trees continued growing. The sun continued rising. But beneath this peaceful surface, something dangerous was developing. The owl did not forget. Every night, it watched the sky. Every night, it remembered the crow. Every night, its hatred became stronger. The owl began gathering others who shared its anger. Other owls noticed the change in their leader. They saw the determination in its eyes. They heard the bitterness in its words. The owl told them, "The crows are our enemies. They took away our rightful future. They destroyed our chance to rule." Some owls asked, "Was it truly the crows who caused this?" But the owl did not want questions. It wanted agreement. It wanted others to share its anger. Soon, the story changed. The truth became forgotten. The owl no longer remembered that it had failed because of its own pride. Instead, it told everyone, "The crows betrayed us. The crows humiliated us. The crows must pay." And when a false story is repeated enough times, many begin to believe it. The owls prepared themselves. The crows sensed something was wrong. The peaceful relationship between the two groups slowly disappeared. The forest that once held many different creatures living together began to divide. Two clans looked at each other with suspicion. Two groups that once shared the same sky began preparing for conflict. The first battle had not yet happened. No feathers had fallen. No blood had been spilled. But the war had already begun inside their hearts. Because every great conflict begins before the first attack. It begins with a thought, a fear, a misunderstanding, a desire for revenge. And on that night, beneath the cold moonlight, the owl created a promise that would change the fate of both clans forever. The seasons changed. The forest continued its endless rhythm. Spring brought new leaves. Summer filled the trees with life. Autumn covered the ground with golden colors. Winter brought silence beneath the cold sky. To ordinary creatures, everything seemed unchanged. But beneath this peaceful appearance, a hidden conflict was growing stronger. The owls had not forgotten their anger. The crows had not forgotten their concern. The two groups that once shared the same forest now watched each other carefully. Whenever a crow flew across the sky, an owl would observe from the shadows. Whenever an owl appeared among the trees, the crows became alert. Fear slowly replaced trust. Suspicion slowly replaced friendship. And all of it began from one moment when pride refused to accept wisdom. The owl had become the leader of those who carried resentment. Every night, it gathered its followers beneath the darkness. The moonlight revealed their silent figures sitting among the branches. Their eyes reflected the same anger. Their hearts carried the same hatred. The owl spoke to them, "For too long, we have been dishonored. For too long, others have ignored our strength. The crows were the ones who destroyed our future. They prevented me from becoming the rightful king." The younger owls listened. Many had never experienced the coronation ceremony. Many did not know the complete truth. They only heard the story told by their leader. A story of betrayal. A story of injustice. A story where they were the victims. The owl continued, "We cannot allow this humiliation to remain unanswered. The crows must understand the price of challenging us." The owls became silent. Then one by one, they nodded. The desire for revenge spread through the group. They no longer saw crows as fellow creatures of the forest. They saw enemies. This is how hatred grows. First, a creature creates a painful memory. Then it repeats that memory until it becomes an identity. Finally, it begins searching for someone to punish. The owl waited for the right opportunity. And soon, the opportunity arrived. One night, when the forest was covered in complete darkness, the owls spread their wings. The world belonged to them at night. Their vision was clear. Their movements were silent. Their bodies disappeared among the shadows. The crows, who were active during the day, had already returned to their nests. They rested peacefully. They believed the forest was still safe. They did not know that danger was approaching. The owls flew silently through the night sky. No warning was given. No challenge was announced. The first attack began. The owls entered the trees where the crows lived. Their sharp claws and powerful beaks became weapons. The sleeping crows were caught unprepared. Panic spread quickly. The peaceful night was broken by cries of fear. The crows awakened in confusion. They tried to escape. They tried to defend themselves. But the darkness belonged to the owls. The owls had chosen the moment when they held the greatest advantage. The crows finally understood. The warning had become reality. The danger they feared had arrived. Many crows escaped into the darkness. Some flew toward distant trees. Some hid among thick branches. Some stayed behind to protect their families. The forest that once held peaceful songs was now filled with fear. The owls did not stop. They believed they were restoring justice. They believed they were taking revenge. They believed they were correcting a wrong done to them. But revenge rarely brings peace. It only creates new suffering. When the attack ended, the owls returned to their homes. They felt victorious. They believed they had defended their honor. The owl leader looked at the night sky. For a moment, it felt satisfied. It thought, now they understand our power. Now they know they cannot challenge us. But deep inside, something remained empty. Because defeating an enemy does not heal a wounded heart. Punishing another creature does not remove anger. And destroying trust does not restore what was lost. Meanwhile, the crows gathered together after the attack. They looked at their damaged nests. They looked at their frightened young. They looked at each other with sadness and confusion. They had never expected such hatred. They had warned the birds because they wanted to prevent suffering. They had never wanted conflict. The elder crows asked, "Why did the owls attack us? What caused such hatred?" The crow who had warned the birds remained silent for a long time. Finally, it spoke. "This began long before tonight. It began when someone could not accept the truth. It began when disappointment became pride. And pride became hatred." The younger crows asked, "Can this hatred be stopped?" The elder crow looked toward the dark sky. It answered, "Hatred is easy to begin, but difficult to end. Once fear takes root in the heart, even peaceful words may sound like threats." The crows realized that this was no longer a simple disagreement. A new reality had been created. The owls had chosen them as enemies. And now, survival required caution. From that night onward, the crows changed their habits. They became more careful. They watched the sky before resting. They protected their young. They avoided traveling alone at night. The forest had changed. A conflict that began with a rejected warning had now become a struggle between two clans. And the owl, sitting beneath the moonlight, believed the first victory belonged to it. But it did not know something important. The first victory of hatred is often the beginning of a much greater tragedy. After the first attack, the forest was no longer the same. The songs of birds that once filled the morning sky became quieter. The peaceful gatherings beneath ancient trees disappeared. The creatures who once shared the same rivers, the same branches, and the same open sky now lived with fear in their hearts. The crows and owls had become enemies. At first, many birds believed the conflict would end quickly. They thought the anger of the owls would disappear after revenge was taken. They thought the crows would eventually forget the attack. But hatred is not like a storm that arrives and leaves. Hatred is like a seed planted in the soil. If nobody removes it, it grows roots. And those roots slowly spread deeper. The owls continued their attacks. Every night, when darkness covered the forest, they flew silently through the sky. Their eyes searched for crows resting among the trees. The crows became their chosen targets. The owls believed every attack was a reminder of their strength. They believed every victory restored their lost honor. But each attack created another wound. And each wound created another reason for revenge. The crows were forced to defend themselves. They began creating new ways to survive. They no longer rested without caution. They no longer trusted the darkness. They placed guards near their nests. They warned younger crows about the danger. They taught their children, never forget the owl's shadow. The forest that once represented harmony slowly became a place filled with suspicion. Every sound at night caused fear. Every movement among the branches caused anxiety. A simple flight across the sky became dangerous. The birds were no longer living freely. They were living according to fear. The original reason for choosing a king had been forgotten. The birds once gathered because they wanted protection. They wanted someone who could bring peace. But their decision had created the opposite. Instead of unity, there was division. Instead of safety, there was conflict. Instead of compassion, there was hatred. The wise crow watched these changes with sadness. It remembered the day when all birds gathered together. It remembered how everyone wanted a better future. It remembered how quickly excitement had replaced careful thinking. The crow understood a painful truth: a kingdom does not fall only because of enemies. Sometimes, it falls because of the choices made by those seeking protection. The crow did not hate the owl. It hated the ignorance that allowed hatred to grow. It knew the owl was not born as an enemy. The owl became an enemy because pride controlled its heart. One evening, the crow gathered the younger crows around. They asked, "Why does this continue? Why can't both sides stop? Why must we always fight?" The elder crow looked at the sky. It answered, "Because hatred feeds itself. One side attacks. The other side remembers pain. Then the pain creates anger. And anger creates another attack. This cycle continues until someone chooses wisdom instead of revenge." The young crows asked, "Then who will stop it?" The elder crow remained silent. It knew the answer was difficult. Because stopping hatred requires one side to become stronger than its own anger. It requires someone to choose peace when revenge feels easier. Meanwhile, the owls became increasingly confident. Their leader believed the crows were weakening. The owl gathered its followers and said, "Look at what we have achieved. The crows hide from us. They fear our power. This proves we are stronger." Many owls celebrated. But a few older owls began feeling uneasy. They remembered that the conflict had started from a coronation ceremony. They remembered that the crows had not attacked first. They wondered, are we truly defending justice? Or are we only continuing revenge? But these voices were ignored. The desire for victory was louder than the voice of wisdom. This is another danger of conflict. Once a group becomes attached to winning, it may forget why the battle began. The original purpose disappears. Only victory remains. Years passed. The young birds grew older. New generations were born. Many of them never witnessed the original disagreement. They never saw the crow's warning. They never saw the owl sitting alone on the empty throne. They only inherited the hatred. The crows taught their young, "Beware the owls." The owls taught their young, "Never trust the crows." A new generation grew up believing that hatred was natural. They believed enemies had always existed. They forgot that once, both groups had lived beneath the same sky. This is how conflicts survive across generations. Not because everyone remembers the truth, but because everyone remembers the story they were taught. The forest became divided. The night belonged to the owls. The day belonged to the crows. The sky between them became a battlefield. And the tragedy was this: neither side remembered the original lesson. The birds had wanted a king who could protect them. But they had forgotten that the greatest protection does not come from power. It comes from wisdom. They had searched for strength. But they had ignored compassion. And now, because of that mistake, two clans suffered for generations. The war between crows and owls continued. And the forest waited for someone wise enough to end it. Many years passed. The forest changed. The trees grew taller. The rivers continued flowing. New birds were born, and old birds disappeared. Generations came and went beneath the same sky. Yet one thing remained unchanged. The war between crows and owls continued. The young owls inherited the hatred of their ancestors. The young crows inherited the fear of their ancestors. Neither side remembered the beginning clearly anymore. The original event had become a distant memory. The details had faded. The emotions remained. This is the tragedy of hatred. Time can erase the truth, but if hatred is passed from one generation to another, it can survive longer than memory itself. The owls still believed, the crows stole our destiny. The crows still believed, the owls would never stop hunting us. Both sides carried the pain of the past into the present. Both sides believed they were protecting themselves. Both sides believed they were right. But neither side understood. A war can continue even when nobody remembers why it started. One day, deep within the forest, a wise elder gathered many creatures together. The elder had watched the conflict for a very long time. It had seen the first seeds of hatred. It had seen fear grow into anger. It had seen anger become violence. And it understood that the greatest enemy was not the owl. It was not the crow. The greatest enemy was ignorance. The elder spoke, "Look carefully at this war. Ask yourselves, what was the first cause of this suffering? The crows did not attack first. The owls were not born enemies. The conflict began because one creature could not accept a painful truth. The creatures listened quietly. The elder continued, when the birds chose their king, they made a mistake. They looked at appearance before character. They looked at ability before wisdom. They looked at power before compassion. The creatures lowered their heads. The lesson became clear. A ruler is not great because others fear them. A ruler is great because others feel safe near them. A leader is not measured by how many obey their commands. A leader is measured by how many lives they protect. The elder continued, the owl had a gift. It could see clearly in the darkness. But seeing the darkness is not enough. To guide others, one must also understand the light. The creatures reflected on these words. The owl had possessed a special ability. But it lacked the qualities needed to lead. The crow had possessed wisdom. But wisdom alone could not force others to listen. This was another lesson. Truth can be offered. But it cannot be forced. A wise voice may warn others. But each creature must choose whether to hear it. The elder looked toward the sky. The birds wanted a king because they feared danger. But fear itself became the reason they created more danger. They searched for strength. But they forgot compassion. They wanted protection, but they ignored wisdom. The forest became silent. Every creature understood. The greatest disasters often begin with a small mistake. A decision made without careful thought. A desire that grows too quickly. A pride that refuses correction. The elder finally said, "Never choose a leader only because they appear powerful. Never trust a voice only because it sounds confident. Never reject advice only because it is uncomfortable. Sometimes the words we dislike most are the words that protect us." The story of the crows and owls became a lesson remembered throughout the forest. A lesson about leadership. A lesson about pride. A lesson about forgiveness. The birds learned that a true king does not seek a throne. A true king carries responsibility. A true leader does not demand respect. A true leader earns trust. And a true protector does not create fear. A true protector creates peace. The ancient forest continued growing. The rivers continued flowing. The sky continued opening above all creatures. And the story of the crow and the owl remained as a reminder: before placing a crown upon someone's head, look beyond their appearance. Before giving power to someone's hands, understand the heart within them. Because the wrong ruler can create suffering for generations. But wisdom and compassion can end conflicts that seem impossible to heal. The greatest victory is not defeating an enemy. The greatest victory is defeating hatred itself. And that is the wisdom hidden within the war between crows and owls.